So I have to tell you that you have Don Milton III to thank for this sermon not being a total bummer. See, it was going to be kind of a downer, but then last night I had the joyful opportunity to attend the Gay Men's Chorus of Atlanta's concert, Queens and Queen. And it was the epitome of making a joyful noise. To see 100 men on stage so free, so fierce, and fanboying out to artists who got them through difficult times in their own lives, well, that was a moment for dancing in the aisles if there ever was one. Though I was the only one dancing. That's okay. But my spirit is still dancing. She hasn't quite caught up with me yet this morning. However, with the exception of last night, and I am so grateful for it, I have been feeling pretty Lent-ish. In fact, I was grateful for all those days of dreary rain. Yes, this is the right time to work on this sermon. And then the sun came and I shielded my eyes. Perhaps you've been feeling this Lent season heavily too. I mean, when that groundhog said there would be 6 more weeks of winter, he really meant it this year. As it turns out, it may become more than 6 weeks. I'm really, really glad all of you decided to come here. And I am also so grateful to all of those who are watching from home, wherever you are. I will say it is a little ironic that even as I tell my children not to look for the monsters under their beds, not to heed the robber that chases them in their dreams, and to pay no mind to the shuffles they hear in the dark house, come Sunday morning, I'm telling you just the opposite. For as long as there have been humans, there have been stories of heroes. And as long as there have been heroes, well, they must have someone to fight. Villains. Even God had an entourage of monsters up in heaven who God could dispatch at various moments when God needed chaos to rain down to see what humanity might do. What innovative solution the humans might concoct, or simply how would they react, all of us, fish in a bowl. Some monsters, like the Leviathan, were primordial, who predated even the act of creation, recurring throughout the narrative and wholly destructive. Perhaps it's because I am the mother of boys, but I end each night with stories of dragons, robbers, orcs, and anti-heroes, all devising tests of courage, strength, will, and most of all, wit, creativity. For this reason, I have devised an absolutely pedestrian storyline to accompany the monsters and villains that I talk about each night, highlighting the adventures of Prince Macamaca. The stories have such titles as Prince Macamaca Goes to the Bank, Prince Macamaca Goes Out for Ice Cream, and Prince Macamaca Gets Picked Up from School and Arrives Home Safely in Time for Dinner. These, too, are nightly requests after all the dangerous stories have been told. Nothing much happens in Prince Macamaca's suburban landscape, and we all like it there just fine. Both stories are true. Both the lilting meditative meanderings of a young prince who takes trips to the bank and arrives home from school unharmed, and the stories of monsters who lurk in dark caves, who prey on our fears and our vulnerabilities, be they because we are children, or we are women, or we are Black, or Latinx, or Asian, or we are queer, or we are transgender, or we are less powerful, or poor, or meek. Everyone has a villain, an enemy, a demon who can become overgrown and take up all the space in your psyche until someone returns you back down to a perspective that can only be found in relationship with others. right now, one villain looms large for many of us. This is actually kind of helpful. It establishes a clear order for us amidst chaos. We can relish our stance as the good ones, united against one true monster. You know the one in the red hat. The one with the skin that seems to glow orange and the toupee that reveals a bald head like that of Lex Luthor. Another villain who was very fun to hate. Not only are we well into Lent, but today happens to be International Women's Day. It's got applause in the first service. Come on. March 8th is also the day when, throughout my 20s, I often directed productions of the Vagina Monologues, often in Unitarian Universalist sanctuaries. On International Women's Day, I connect to the experience of all women across the globe, which is, sadly and unfortunately, often an experience of violence that women must survive if they do across the world. And I'm glad now that the word gaslighting has taken hold, has captured the American imagination during these days of apocalyptic unveiling in this world where more and more women have proclaimed, "Me too." Gaslighting, if you don't know, is a term derived from a play that premiered in London in 1938. The play was set in fog-bound London in 1880 at the upper-middle-class home of Jack Manningham and his wife, Bella. It is late afternoon. It is a time that is known as that the playwright writes, before the feeble dawn of gaslight and tea. Bella is clearly on edge, and the stern reproaches of her overbearing husband, who flirts with all the servants throughout the play, make matters much worse. What most perturbs Bella is Jack's unexplained disappearances from the house. He will not tell her where he is going, and this increases her anxiety. It becomes clear that Jack is intent on convincing Bella that she is going insane, even to the point of assuring her she is imagining that the gaslight in the house is dimming each night after he leaves. Technically, gaslighting is a form of psychological manipulation in which a person or a group covertly sows seeds of doubt on a targeted individual, making them question their own memory, perception, or judgment, often evoking in them a cognitive dissonance and other changes such as low self-esteem at best. This particular monster, while it's a shapeshifter, makes it very difficult when doing battle. So, where do we go looking for that New Jersey devil in 2020? We have monsters for a reason. The lore of the Jersey Devil is a woman who was overrun by children, who perhaps uttered a blasphemous curse upon her own family out of exhaustion. I mean, who has not done that? But those times in America, well, that was enough to conjure a devil out there in those woods. The women have often been the ones being gaslit and tortured by monsters, stolen away by dragons or giant apes, grabbed and taken up to skyscrapers. They are also blamed for conjuring those same monsters across legend and history, which is why, after a week of letting go yet again of that dream, the one that tells us girls that maybe if we persist beyond all expectation, maybe if we devise brilliant, beautifully concrete plans to save the entire country from ruin, that maybe we will become more than a mere afterthought in an election for our national leader. This is why women may be feeling particularly exhausted March 8th, 2020. Yet, we will persist. We are the search party for the monster, because once it is known, it can be named. It can be unmasked, hunted. We can have it out. We can have that reckoning, which means we must attune ourselves to different energy, not always to hope, but to deep commitment to wisdom, to self-understanding, and most of all, commitment to each other. This concept of gaslighting, of lying, and attempting to create a whole different reality, well, it's much older than that 1938 play, of course. It's interesting because the play was written during a time when masses of people across Europe were being gaslit. They were having a new reality constructed around them, one that sought to polarize them and to turn them finally into either victims or survivors on a mass scale. I'm thinking it may be time for a revival of this production. In 2020, we must stay wise to the ways we are being manipulated now and polarized. The theologian and journalist Krista Tippett suggests change of this magnitude we are experiencing acts upon us psychologically, not just electorally. The truth is, there are so many ways that are not about politics, that are just about the air we breathe, how we define our identity, and the fact that we are the generation that is redefining marriage and community and gender, this human ground beneath our feet while it's shifting. Not to mention the economic ground, shifting, making it such an unsettled time. And sometimes I wonder if politics has really just become the thinnest of veneers over this, which is really just the human condition. And the person she's interviewing is Ezra Klein, another journalist, who talks about returning later in life to the Tao Te Ching, reading the Tao Te Ching and being deeply, deeply struck by its ideas of non-dualism. Its challenge to think about everything is also encoding its opposite. So much about what we are taught to think, very much in politics, but also in general, is that things are just one way. They are right or they are wrong. We got it right or we got it wrong. This person won and this person lost. It's a clean equation. It has one answer every single time. And Klein says the deep truth about the Obama presidency is that the Trump presidency was within it the entire time. And the story does not end there. Ezra Klein goes on to talk about journalism today. He says, I think there is a deep way in which we are being manipulated into a constant state of emergency. And it would be one thing if that were a productive emotion. But what I think is that it leads to a constant state of either exhaustion or hypervigilance. Who's with me? Feeling that. Exhaustion or hypervigilance, both of which can be destructive in their ways. And when we become pulled into that polarizing narrative, we lose all the other stories in our world that are also true. There's there's a whole other narrative to the stories of our lives, which is actual people in real places, stitching our country back together, one relationship at a time. It happens right here in this community. I am honored to bear witness to it. It's happening all around us. But it is very hard to make that narrative into a riveting story in this age of constant information. It's difficult to make that into a riveting story the way it's easy to make something terrible or a disaster or an evil person into a riveting story. Ezra Klein invites us to step back from the narrative of good versus evil and shock and confrontation that we are being drawn into constantly. The truth is, we can have a much greater impact on our local political system than we can on the national one, no matter who is president. We can build relationships, build connections, and a sense of personal empowerment if we change our news diet to local issues, Get involved in the issues that matter to our local community. So if your news diet right now is 90 national news and 10% local news, as Recline suggests, you push that pendulum swing a little further in the other direction. See, there are so many insidious forces that wish to draw us into this hero and villain narrative. It's such an old concept, this gaslighting of people for powerful gain. It is so old, well, I wondered if it was biblical. And this week, I have been drawn to what was probably the first or the second book of Scripture ever written, Proverbs, based on Egyptian wisdom sayings passed down ancestrally. I have always loved the wisdom Proverbs. Wisdom, maybe it's because wisdom is generally personified as female. And she warns against various forms of knowledge that are not of God, which you could also say are of your heart, of heart knowledge, of grounding knowledge. The act of discerning one's truth is a spiritual discipline. It's a devotional and a sacred conversation with one's true core. So here, from Proverbs, listen. Does wisdom not call out? Does not understanding raise her voice? At the highest point along the way where the paths meet, she makes her stand. Beside the gate leading into the city, at the entrance she cries aloud, "To you, O people, I call out, to raise my voice to all humankind. To the discerning, all of them are right. They are upright to those who have found knowledge. Choose my instruction instead of silver, knowledge rather than gold. For wisdom is more precious than rubies, and nothing you desire can compare with her." Wisdom calls out, calls to all people. And today we see women calling out their abusers, taking down gaslighters who were once seen as great. Wisdom is powerful when she raises her voice. You can find this too in the lyrics of spirituals. You can find great anguish and lamentation within, giving voice to the fear, unveiling the monster's true nature. My colleague, Reverend Nancy MacDonald Ladd, writes about how in the Black church tradition, people stand when the Black national anthem starts. They may raise their hands, ball their fists, grasp their neighbors on the arm, while singing the words that are uniquely endowed to Black Americans through their history of oppression and courageous resistance. The lyrics carry on fearlessly and without flinching. Listen, we have come over a way that with tears has been watered. We have come treading our path through the blood of the slaughtered, out from the gloomy past, till now we stand at last, where the white gleam of our bright star is cast. These words, describing a violent path toward freedom, well, this is healing lament, giving voice to the pain, to the slaughter, to the gloom of the past. Well, this is a significant step to constructing a healing future. But the monster must be named and found out and lifted out of the silent hiding places where they thrive and wish to remain always. What are you most afraid of? Every monster needs a search party. With our lamplights, our flashlights, and our maps, we can enter the dark woods together, like those Scooby-Doo characters. Together, we can unmask the culprit, find the truer and often scarier thing underneath. Perhaps it is within our own nature. We can name it. We can sing it, testify to it. We can call it by its true name. Pull away the mask, and then we can see that the monster is not, in fact, a virus. It is the panic combined with an untrustworthy leader, combined with racism, combined with self-interested hoarding that creates chaos and destruction. That's the monster. If you encounter this particular beast that messes with your reality, will you just shine your light up to its face? Share your story. Name your reality, your internal core of deep wisdom. Women's voices, women's strength to stop the monster in their tracks and say, this person is harassing me. This is happening to me. This is real. We can all call up on this strength of women's truth-telling, whether or not we are women, to speak our truth, to confess our wrongdoings. Well, that also reveals a monster. And we'll talk about that later on in our series. But this is the work of Lent. So welcome to the world of Lent. This is women's work. This is all of our work toward a different kind of hope, a new commitment. We will embark together on what my colleague, Reverend Dr. Daniel Cantor, calls moral alchemy, turning a villain into something new, turning our hero stories around on their heads with our deep inner wisdom that we are just more complex than any Marvel movie would have us believe. So speak your truth. Seek deeper wisdom. And join each other's search parties. In this way, we will connect to a longer, deeper narrative, one beyond good and evil. And we will stay connected to what Tillich called our ground of being. And I'll be with you too. This will get us through. Oh yeah. May it be so. Blessed be.